To insert an invisible zip. So I'm starting with the right side of my fabric facing, and I place my zip with the wrong side of the zip facing me. So in other words, right side of the zip facing right side of the garment. Okay, and turn it down and then open the zip. Now excuse the colour, I'm literally working with what I've got. So I place my fabric at my 1.5 seam allowance measurement, okay, and then place the zip underneath that, okay, but I want to roll out those teeth as much as possible, okay. There's my full 1.5 seam allowance there, and then I've got 1.5 seam allowance on the top as well, okay. So I'm putting the invisible zip in using the 1/2 foot, because I reckon most of you don't have access to a zipper foot at home. Just wondering, is that better or worse? I might leave that on. Okay, so just to start that again, because always placing the zip is always the tricky bit. This is the right side of my garment, and I'm working at the moment with the zip facing down like that. Okay, so open the zip the whole way, place the foot of the machine at your 1.5 seam allowance this way, and then place the zip so that the stitching line is 1.5 seam allowance away as well. Okay, and then we start off a little back tack. So what I'm doing is I'm curling the zip out as I go, so that I can get my foot in as close as possible, because of the fact that I don't have a proper zipper foot. So make sure to curl that out as much as possible, because I want to stitch in as close to the teeth as I can. Now, when I get down here, I'm going to move this, sorry, I want to get all this fabric out of the way so that you can actually see what I'm doing here. Okay. When you get to this point here, so this is the end of where I stitched up my centre back seam, I want the stitching of my zip to line up exactly with that point, okay? So I have folded the other half of my back, so it's nice and neat here, so that I have a clear line of sight to that stitch. And I'm placing the teeth over beyond it a wee bit, so that when I curl my teeth out, that's where my line of stitching will hit. Okay, and that is the first half. So despite that being a green zip, you can actually see very little of the tape on the side that I've stitched. Okay. Now, a little trick that I always do to make sure that I balance the end of my zip correctly is, now when I have it closed, before I stitch up my second half, I notch the zip and the fabric like that, so that when I go to place the other half, I know I've balanced my zip correctly the whole way along here. and it avoids getting a bubble at the end of the zip. So we need to change our foot and use the other half. Okay, open your zip the whole way down, and then placing the notch on the zip and the notch on the seam together, you can pop a little pin in place. I always find it best to sew the zip down in the same direction, so I would always sew my zip from the top down on both sides, just to have it. And again, making sure you've left the same amount here at the top, which is your 1.5 seam allowance, and again curling out the zip as much as possible, and then also making sure to take off my full 1.5 seam allowance here. So if we want to double check that, 1.5, okay? Because obviously you've no seam guide on this side, so it's no harm just to take out the measuring tape and double check it. So again, curling the zip out as much as possible. And you just work your way down, curling those teeth out. Also, keeping the fabric straight here on the machine really helps. So constantly push the dress through if you need to. Okay, you're working the whole way down. And then I know I have this side point here lined up perfectly because my two notches are still correct, because I need to take my pin out at this stage, so at least I still have my notch as a guide. So like I did on the other side, I'm going to fold this out of the way so that I can aim my last little bit of stitching to line up correctly with that point. Now with the zipper foot you've got a shorter foot, so it's easier to get right into that last stitch, but the half foot does a pretty good job. Okay, so that's what it looks like, and you kind of think, how on earth is that going to zip up? So what you do, just move the camera a little bit, take your zip, pull it so far, hold your seam allowance, hold your zip, and then continue to pull, and then flip through. And as I say, considering I didn't have the right colour of zip, that's a pretty good finish. So that's my invisible zip.